Hi, this is Chatterboxing. I'm Sean, and I just want to make a quick video about something I saw the other day. I saw people talking about Kell Brook fighting potentially Terence Crawford. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about Errol Spence as well. Um, Now I saw an interview with Coogan Cassius on IFL TV with Crawford. I saw people talking about it before then as well. Bob Arum is interested in making it happen. I'm a big fan of both of them. I'm a big Kell Brook fan, have been for years. Big fan of Crawford as well. If the fight did happen, I'd obviously be supporting Kell Brook, but I like both of them. Um, I don't like the fight at welterweight. I don't think there's much point in it. I don't think it does anything for anyone really. Um, the only way I'd be interested in it if it was at light middleweight. Unfortunately, I don't really see why Terence Crawford would be up for doing that. I don't see what he particularly gets out of it. I mean, he's world champion at welterweight. He's sort of pound for pound one of the best, if not the best. Um, he's the man of the moment. He's earning lots of money every fight. Everybody wants to see him against Errol Spence. If he went up to fight at light middleweight against Kell Brook doesn't even have a world title. He's a big name, good fighter. It'd be good for his record if he did go up there. But if Kell Brook doesn't have a world title, why would he really want to do that and take that risk? Possibly negatively affect his welterweight career as well. So if the fight did happen, it would happen at welterweight, which I don't think is particularly interesting to anyone. Kell Brook hasn't fought at welterweight since the Errol Spence fight, which was, I don't know, a couple of years ago at least. He'd been struggling to make weight before then as well, for quite some time. So he's like mid-30s. It's just not a good idea for him to get down to light welterweight, especially not to fight someone like Terence Crawford, who's on top of his game, very, very dangerous, lethal, really. I think that would be a bad idea to go into that fight drained, not really much strength or stamina, not very good preparation. I wouldn't really want to see it particularly. Crawford himself doesn't seem particularly interested in it. He said in the interview with Coogan Cassius, obviously he wants to fight Errol Spence. Get onto that in a minute. Manny Pacquiao. And then he also says even like Thurman or Garcia. Now, presumably just because they're sort of in America, bigger names in America, they're still fighting at welterweight. So there's more intrigue there, I suppose, for them. Probably personally as well, because they already fought Danny Garcia. There's been a lot of back and forth between them. Keith Thurman as well. Keith Thurman's talked a load of smack, as they say, about Terence Crawford, saying that he's not that impressed, but I think he'd probably just like to beat up Keith Thurman, I reckon. But yeah, Errol Spence is the fight that we all want to see. But obviously with the recent car crash of Errol Spence, it's difficult to really know like how Errol Spence is going to be when he comes back. Now he's talking about fighting, or they're talking about him fighting Danny Garcia, saying that he's been made a mandatory or something. Now, I think that would be quite a ballsy move, to be honest, to fight. I know he's a unified champion, so obviously a lot of things are expected of you. But personally, I'd prefer to see him in there with a softer touch than that after the accident. Because he could be very damaged. So if I was managing him, I'd think, well, I'm going to try and get him in there with someone who's not really much threat at all. And in these circumstances, as a fan, I wouldn't have any problem with that at all. See where he is, and then if he is good, if he doesn't have like any major problems, and he does feel like he's back to himself, fuck off the Danny Garcia fight, and then go straight in there with Terence Crawford. Because what's the point of I mean, Danny Garcia is a mandatory challenger, I suppose now, so you can say in that respect. But if you can make a unification fight, surely they could, move that out of the way. Because aside from that, there's no real advantage to fighting Danny Garcia. I actually think that's quite a potentially dangerous style matchup for Errol Spence. I think Errol Spence could fight Garcia in a certain way, kind of a bit like Thurman did. Now, he's not as agile as Thurman, but he does have good range. He's more he's got a better rhythm than Thurman, and he could just keep him with the jab, like keep the distance, because that's what you need to do with Danny Garcia. If you got in close with him, because like Spence sometimes does like to get in close, push you with the elbow, and just start winging in those big hooks and body shots. Now, I wouldn't bother doing that personally against Danny Garcia. I just don't really see there's any need for it, because I think he could beat him from range quite comfortably, wear him down. But Danny Garcia is always dangerous with those like swinging left hooks that he does. And Errol Spence, I'm not saying he's chinny. He hasn't shown that he's chinny. He's looked reasonably tough, but we don't know how that's going to affect his punch resistance. The car crash. Also, the fact that he's been, again, like Kell Brook, been struggling a bit with the weight, I think. I mean, he mentioned it himself. He's been a welterweight for quite a long time. He's naturally a big guy. And also the lifestyle. Now, it seems that he's kind of going down the wrong path, Errol Spence, and it seemed like that for a while. Going out drinking, not really dedicating himself as much as he could have done, as he could do to boxing, which obviously going to have long-term effects, and it's going to make it more and more difficult for him to make that weight. So for me right now, the Crawford Spence fight is it's not something that, obviously we've got this situation now with this coronavirus, but even aside from that, just Errol Spence is a complete unknown for me. That's why I wouldn't even put him in there with Danny Garcia. I'd put him in there with, I don't know who, but someone really who's basically no threat, can't punch, doesn't have a particularly high work rate, and isn't that ambitious, really. I mean, obviously, fighting Spence now, anyone like that is going to try and put it on him, and they're going to up their game, because they're going to think, this is my chance to beat a very good fighter who's potentially like a shell of himself. So anyone who fights him right now will have that extra motivation. But someone like Danny, like forget Crawford, like no chance. If you put him straight in there with Crawford now, that would be criminal, in my opinion. It's definitely made, like, not forget the accident, the way that Spence has been living recently, the weight, the drinking, the lack of discipline has definitely made me lean a lot more towards Crawford if that fight happens. Now, at one point I was looking at it real 50-50, but I was giving the edge to Spence. I think when Spence beat Kell Brook, and then he beat Lamont Peterson, and he was looking very good back then. Against Sean Porter, he looked decent, but that was a really close fight. Now, Sean Porter's improved. Sean Porter will give anyone a hard night's work, but I was expecting that to be a lot easier than it was. Credit to Sean Porter, but still, Spence, he looked like a little bit on the slide. Mikey Garcia, I was expecting Mikey Garcia to get knocked out, so that wasn't particularly impressive to me, that performance. So I do think that the lifestyle, maybe like, the money, the kind of influences, like hanging around with people like Broner and Tank Davis, and a lot of these characters who are, they're different to him. Like Errol Spence is someone who, when I first saw Spence, and he was first talking about him fighting Brook, and there was a lot of hype around that, and I was looking at him, I was quite impressed by his mentality. I thought that this is someone who's very professional, someone who is dedicated, someone who's no nonsense, very mature, level-headed. I thought he had a good head on his shoulders, and he had good physical attributes, good boxing skill, etc. But I thought that his mentality and his mindset was going to be a big thing for him. And I actually compared him to Kell Brook. I remember once saying that Kell Brook is a bit ill-disciplined, like to go out drinking with the lads, like going out nightclubs, getting into punch-ups, and just not professional athlete behaviour. And I said, like, Spence doesn't seem like that. He seems like very level-headed and very disciplined. Now, recently we haven't seen that. Maybe like the money and just he's got into all this. I mean, I suppose he's been training and dedicated his life to boxing for years, and he hasn't really been out doing all that stuff that we all did when we were teenagers and early 20s and stuff like that. So maybe now he's thinking, fucking, this is good fun. I like all this. I mean, at the end of the day, he's a unified champion, millionaire. I mean, he has, to a certain extent, made it, hasn't he? I mean, he's achieved a lot financially in terms of boxing accomplishments. So maybe he's just doesn't have that same drive and that same hunger that he did have. I mean, that's what it's looked like. We have to see how this accident has affected him, whether that's given him the sort of kick up the arse that he needed, or whether it's just accentuated the problem psychologically. I mean, like physically, it can't be good for you. I mean, I saw the image of it and it looked horrific. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But in terms of Crawford, he's someone really who's at the top of his game. Every time I see him, looks better, just very, very dominant. It's going to take an extremely good fighter to beat him, and someone who you can't be fighting against someone like that when you're, halfway in, when you're doing your training, but you're going out having a few beers, going to bed when you feel like it. It just doesn't work like that. So for me, there's a big difference between the two right now. I think Crawford is definitely the standout fighter at that weight division. So I don't want to see him fight Kell Brook unless it's at light middleweight. I don't want to see him fight Errol Spence until Spence shown me that he's back. And I'm not talking about what I was talking about with his sort of discipline. I mean, like physically after the injury. Thurman's not going to fight Crawford, is he? Let's be honest. Danny Garcia isn't going to fight Crawford. So maybe he should move up to light middleweight, fight Kell Brook.